Zhu Ling is the name of a former student of Beijing's prestigious Tsinghua University. In 1995, she fell ill suddenly and was diagnosed with thallium poisoning. Zhu was left paralysed with permanent damage to her nervous system and other organs. She's now 40 years old, blind, and has the mental age of a 7-year-old and needs constant care. To add insult to injury, over 19 years later, the case of who poisoned her remains unsolved. One of Zhu's college roommates at the time, Sun Wei, was taken in for police questioning in 1997 but later released, and the case was shelved and no further explanations given. According to several Chinese media reports, Sun is believed to have later emigrated to the United States. Recently, another university poisoning incident, this time fatal and involving apparent jealousy between roommates, seems to have reignited interest in Zhu's almost forgotten case. Her name became one of the most searched for phrases on the microblogging site Weibo and indeed on other social media sites until censors briefly banned it. And then a campaign was begun by Chinese net users to use the White House's We the People petition website to raise the issue. This demands that Sun Wei be deported to China from the US and the case reinvestigated. Well, the petition has already received the 100,000 signatures within 30 days necessary to merit a response from the White House. And finally, it seems state media in China are beginning to address this case too. Well, to hear the online discussion about this, let's now join our researcher Esther Dung in the newsroom. First, Esther, can you give us a brief outline of who Zhu Ling is and how much net users know about her and her case?
Well, if I type in Zhu Ling online, there's really a lot of information posted about her from many sources. She's described as talented, not only academically, but also at singing and swimming, and won plenty of prizes when she was in Tsinghua University. And she seemed to have very loyal friends. Over the decades, her classmates and others who feel sympathetic to her plight have never ceased trying to spread her story, something that's become a lot easier recently with advances in the internet. But as you said, her case hadn't caught that much attention until recently. Then when the story of a Fudan University student who put poison into his roommate's drinking water broke, it seemed to have spurred interest in Zhu's case and why it was never solved. Lots of posters are actually shocked and sad to hear about her story, some for the first time. Listen to this poster who says on Weibo.com. We can never imagine the pain and torture her elderly parents have suffered over all those years. The culprit must get the punishment they deserve. Now I feel a little better since her story has finally got such a lot of attention. And this poster named Temptation says, Zhu Ling used to be such a beautiful young lady, and her youth and beauty have both been robbed from her in such a cruel way. I really want to ask the culprit, if it was you who had been poisoned, would you have the nerve to live through all these years?
Now, over the years, it seems there's been plenty of discussion of this case, but conspicuously not from the police involved, who've remained silent about it and why it was dropped. Is there any discussion of their role?
Oh, yeah, and not just online or from net users. Actually, lots of Chinese media outlets have asked questions, including the state-owned Xinhua News Agency. It published an article in which it says this. Over the decades, there have been all kinds of voices and rumors over Zhu's case, but the police haven't responded. This is unfair for both Zhu Ling and the suspect. Can we ask how much evidence the police have got? Why haven't the police responded to Zhu's parents' request to make the investigation results public? Why is there no conclusion to this after 19 years? Meanwhile, Zhu's father, Wu Chengzhi, told Southern Metropolis Daily that he believes the police have collected enough evidences and reached a final conclusion. They just don't want to make it public. And an interview appeared in the Legal Daily some years ago said Lu Shusen, the police officer in charge of Zhu's case, had this to say. We have reached some conclusions based on our investigation, and the case is extremely sensitive. But this bleeding around the bush by the police has certainly irritated plenty of net users. Yu Guo Tianqing from Nantong is one of several with questions like this. How many 19 years do people have in their lives? Why is it so hard for ordinary people to know the truth about this?
Now, Esther, what then is the situation with Zhu's former roommate, Sun Wei, who was questioned over this case? What's being said about her?
Well, first, I'd like to explain something. This story about Zhu Ling really began to spread like wildfire on Weibo, the most popular microblogging site in China, around the beginning of this month. Then from May the 3rd to May the 6th, words like thallium, Zhu Ling, and Sun Wei all became sensitive words, meaning they are blocked and can't be searched for. And that was when a lot of anger and suspicion was stirred up online, because that told net users the authorities didn't want this topic to be discussed. Here is a typical reaction on Baidu.com, which reads, when information about Zhu Ling was blocked online, that told us who the perpetrator was. And 以见浪人 has this information from 天涯.cn, another popular online forum where Zhu's story has been widely posted for years. I saw posts saying Sun's grandfather and father both have powerful political background. If this case is re-investigated, it will indicate a huge step forward for China, but it won't. In China, the police, the court, and the prosecutor all collude with each other. Ordinary people taking powerful officials to court, that's a daydream. But on the other hand, there are still a number of posters who warn that it's equally unfair to assume Sun is the culprit. One typical example is Hu Xijin, the editor-in-chief of Huanqiu, or the Global Times in English, a populist pro-government newspaper. On his microblog, he wrote, "First, I feel sorry over Zhu Ling and her family. Second, I oppose any presumption that Sun Wei is the poisoner. Third, saying that Sun's family background halted the investigation is only a guess. Fourth, the authorities should face up to the public doubts and make the investigation information public."
Now, mentioning the Global Times, an editorial in that paper mentioned the case too, arguing that Sun Wei's family background, it said, wasn't of the level of power sufficient to get an investigation dropped. Has that had much response?
Well, actually, I was going to mention that next, and yes, it has. And net users do have a lot to say over the explanation about Sun's family background. One typical example is Fujian Hengha, who asks, so what the paper is saying then is if a person is powerful enough, he or she can stop any investigation, right? And that has really caused a lot of heated discussion among net users over the state of justice in China. I've seen one post that's been reposted again and again by so many posters. It reads, I pay close attention to Zhu Ling's case, not only for her, but also for myself. Judicial injustice is harmful to every ordinary person like us. I feel sorry about Zhu, but also horrified over what may happen to me. I'm here shouting for justice for Zhu and for myself. That's all we can do to push for justice in China and to change this country.
Okay, finally, Esther, can you tell us briefly from net users, what's the reaction been to the fact that at least 100,000 net users feel they have to appeal to a foreign government, in this case the White House, to get some movement on this case?
Well, actually, Zhu's parents told the media that they won't take part in the petition and don't encourage others to do so, as they still believe in using what they call the formal procedures to have their demands met. But many net users are still quite enthusiastic about passing around the petition link. And as you've seen, over 100,000 have signed already. However, from what I can see, not many posters really think this will really help much. Like this poster asks on kittynet.net. Come on, will the US bother themselves to deal with the Chinese issues? And I will finish up with this post from Fa Tiaoren on 163.com, who mentions yet another widely spread allegation in this complicated case. The US won't deal with the poisoning case. They will only investigate the allegations that Sun used a fake marriage to get a US passport.
Okay, thanks for that, Esther. And that was China Take researcher Esther Deng with online reaction to the case of Zhu Ling, a Tsinghua University student poisoned almost 20 years ago. Next up on China Take, some of the top trending phrases on China's most popular search engines.